Okay, so I'm going to do a little bit of a longer piece. This is a prose piece that I wrote, and I debuted it at the Queer Arts Festival in San Francisco last year. It was for a showcase that was called Coming Out Again, and it was about how queer people have to come out over and over again around our various identities. So I wrote this piece. It's called The History of Breathing. When you're adopted, you breathe a little differently. Abandonment is etched into your lungs, becomes scars healed by the love of strangers. I breathe like an adoptee, requiring some effort on the inhale, hurting slightly on the exhale. My first girlfriend took my breath away. Her startling blue eyes, her brown hair cut short and boyish, the way she wore her paint-spattered jeans loose around her hips, her blue sweatshirt startling like her eyes. She saw who I was and loved me, and I fell deeply in love with her as well. She helped me at 20 years old to escape my home and family in Alabama, my fundamentalist mother, my clueless father, my manipulative boyfriend. I scrambled into the passenger seat of her MG convertible. With the top down, we drove out of town towards our life together. Fast Car came on the radio. I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I could be someone. My long dark hair whipped around my face as I smiled at her driving fast and certain down the highway. I threw both arms in the air, exhaled long and steady, and breathed in freedom. As I laughed, my heart was breaking and healing at the same time. At 4 years old, I inhaled deep and held my breath, my throat aching. Is Ivy Mattison a nigger? Another girl in Sunday school asked. Laughing, her blue eyes gleamed with delight at what she perceived to be her own cleverness. I bowed my head to the slur, stood in silence. It was a kind of public outing, a fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl telling the world who and what I was. I exhaled and breathed in the slur with a kind of mutual shame and defiance. I am a nigger, I thought, and also, I am not. Before I became a nigger, breathing was easier. My father sat me and my brother on the couch, squatted in front of us, and told us we were different from him and my mother. He told me I was adopted and Polynesian. I accepted these descriptions to be facts, the way that one accepts air, despite its invisibility, to be both real and necessary. For over 20 years, I was Polynesian, even though I didn't understand what that identity meant precisely, and I'd never met any other Polynesians. Even still, people ask me, "What are you?" For over 20 years, my answer was Polynesian. Turns out, I'm not Polynesian at all. I'm Chamorro. My grandmother on my birth mother's side was a native inhabitant of Guam. I have no idea about the race or national heritage of my birth father. Because I'm light-skinned, I have assumed that he was of some white heritage, but I cannot know for certain. The first time I knew I was Chamorro, I was in my mid-20s. I told my friend Brooke about my racial origins. "You're Chamorro," she said. "I have another Chamorro friend." She was speaking a foreign language to me, Chamorro. It took me a few more decades before I could breathe easy with the description. I'd been Polynesian for over 2 decades. It was hard to be Chamorro, too. An open Bible in her lap, my mother sat and stared over her glasses at me. "Amy, are you a homosexual?" she asked. My heart was pounding. My lungs got stuck on the inhale. "I'm lesbian," I finally exhaled. "I love women." Mama sucked in air between her clenched teeth and let loose an angry and fearful rant that stopped just short from actually disowning me or condemning me to hell. Acceptance was something that she could not and would not give me for another 15 years. My family likes to tell this story. When I was very young, my parents and I were walking downtown. A man stopped us, bent down, and put his face in mine. "Has anyone ever told you you're a pretty girl?" he asked me, a mere 3-year-old. "Yes," I replied in a matter-of-fact way. Being a pretty girl is creepy. It looks like old men in your face, something leering and perverse in their eyes. It sounds like old women sucking their teeth. It feels like strangers' hands smoothing your hair or caressing your arms as you hold your breath. It dominates who you are, becomes the air you breathe. From as early as I can remember until he died, when I was 8 years old, he would breathe fast and heavy as he fondled and prodded me, then shudder and gasp, his ancient mouth open for air. I thought the reason my grandfather was hurting me was because I was a pretty girl, or perhaps because I was adopted, or perhaps because I wasn't white, or maybe because I was all of these things, and somehow I was simply bad. His abuse had nothing to do with me, nothing to do with who I was. Still, it had everything to do with me and who I would become. Sometimes it would make breathing and being alive painful and shameful. It would lodge itself heavy as stone in my throat, burn a sense of worthlessness into my bones. I'm standing on stage, look to the expectant audience waiting for me to perform my poetry. I open my mouth to speak, and my throat suddenly closes. I push to exhale, choke when I try to inhale. My eyes water from the effort. Finally, I force sound from my lungs. I'm speaking words I've written and recited in public dozens of times, but the noise coming from my mouth sounds strange and strained and broken. My psychiatrist asked me about my homosexuality. I tell her how I love women and how they take my breath away. She interrupts me. Do you see it as a choice then? Yes, I answer, and I want to explain how I used to be Polynesian, and now I'm Chamorro, and how I used to be lesbian, and now I'm a dyke, and a queer, and a tranny who loves women, but I don't. I simply breathe deep and repeat myself. Yes, I say again, it's the choice to be who I already am. It has been 35 years since my grandfather last molested me. In all that time, I've never breathed a word of it to my mother. I haven't dared. She idealizes her father, and I fear that he may have molested her as well. By not telling her, I believe I am protecting myself, as I fear her reaction may be to openly disbelieve, betray, reject, or abandon me. But also, I am protecting her from the inevitable pain that telling will bring her. In many ways, I was still a child when I came out to my mother as a lesbian. Now, middle-aged, I'm daunted by the thought of coming out to her again, of telling her the secret of my emotional scars and my grandfather's sins. For me, it's easier to be a queer than to be a victim and survivor of sexual abuse. Revealing the abuse to friends and strangers is always painful, but the thought of telling my mother constricts my chest. My heart races and I get a sick feeling in my gut as I imagine looking to her dark eyes and seeing not love, but the depths of my own self-hatred reflected there. After 5 years, I broke up with my first girlfriend. I shaved my head bald, donned combat boots, and bought a leather jacket. I wore short cut-off jeans and tight t-shirts that brandished my braless breasts. I protested, marched, and rallied for political causes, became active in activist organizations. I was out and starting to learn how to be all of me, not fragments, but the whole of me, in which I was colored and white, Polynesian and Chamorro, a nigger and a dyke, a lesbian and a queer, a pretty girl who survived sexual abuse, a young butch, and the middle-aged, mixed-race, mixed-gender poet who stands before you. For over 2 decades now, I have loved and been loved by women. I have slept beside each of them at night. My breath and my heart beat in sync with theirs. With each passing year, I become more of who I am. I'm older now, but still I drive at fast speeds down the highway towards my life, learning to breathe painlessly and without effort. This is me, breathing, becoming, and coming out again and again. I had a feeling that I belonged. I had a feeling I am someone. I am someone.